Welcome, everyone, and today we are going to be discussing the founding fathers of America. This presentation is brought to you by none other than Alexander Vang, Arshdeep Gill, Felix Chen, Colin Chen, and Angel Sierra. We will be presenting the following founding fathers: George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. Let's start off by George Washington. George Washington was a military general, political leader, statesman, and a founding father. He was born in Pope's Creek Plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia, on February 22, 1732. And although he attended school irregularly, George Washington was fairly well trained in practical mathematics. He also studied geography and read some English classics. Interestingly, he also transcribed, at age 14, a set of civil rules which was named Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation. During the French and Indian War, Washington fought with General Edward Braddock for the British and ended up succeeding, as well as acquiring military knowledge he would later use in the American Revolution. After resigning his commission out of frustration, Washington married widow Martha Dandridge and became one of the richest men in Virginia because his wife had a great fortune. Now that we have some background, let's look at his political life. After a great victory in the American Revolution, Washington became the president of the Constitutional Convention, even though he had a strong desire of going back to his home as a farmer. The Constitutional Convention was the committee that wrote our Constitution. Later in 1780, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president. George Washington chose his cabinet, which included Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of Treasury, Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State, Henry Knox as Secretary of War, and John Jay as the first Chief of Justice. However, George Washington was the first president, and he knew that he would be looked back upon as an example for every other president after him. That is why George Washington made sure to set precedents while in office. So let me give you some examples of those precedents. First, at the end of his oath, he added, "So help me God," which is still applied till now. Also, George Washington did not want to be similar to a monarch, which was the reason why Americans had called for their independence in the first place. This is why Washington ensured that he was only called Mr. President and not Your Highness. Another important thing George Washington had marked was that he refused to serve a third term because he did not want someone in power for that long, which would cause problems as in monarchy did. In addition, George Washington had also made clear in his farewell address that excessive political parties were going to be harmful to the country and that Americans should stay neutral in foreign affairs. So now that we looked at his political life, let's continue on to his achievements. First, he was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and was able to lead the army to victory in the American Revolution and ultimately win the independence of America. Second, in 1789, he became the first president of the United States and set many examples for the following presidents as discussed before. Third, he signed the Naval Act of 1794, which established the U.S. Navy. Fourth, he created a good relation with Britain through the Jay's Treaty, but also issued the Proclamation of Neutrality to avoid unnecessary foreign wars. And fifth, he gave an influential farewell address that gave a lot of advice to the government of America and the people of America.
Now it's time for Alexander Hamilton. He was born in Nevis in British West Indies. Alexander Hamilton was born into poverty and became an orphan after his father left him, and his mother died not long after. After the community heard how much potential young Hamilton had, with his abilities to quickly learn new things and his writing, they decided to help him get into college. So, with help, Alexander Hamilton went to King's College in New York to receive his education. During the American Revolution, he decided to join the patriotism cause and fight for freedom, in which he won over General George Washington's trust. He was only involved in one huge scandal during his career, and it involved Maria Reynolds. It was said that they were having relations, even though they were both married. This happened after Reynolds asked Alexander Hamilton for help at his home in a private conversation at the peak of Hamilton's career. After this scandal happened, Alexander's career was impacted. After the American Revolution, Hamilton joined the cabinet as the Secretary of Treasury. He believed that the government should be run by the educated and that the people had a big impact on the government's actions. Hamilton used his writing to speak his mind and his opinions. He convinced New Yorkers to ratify the Constitution. Hamilton had many rivalries because of these ideas and opinions. Hamilton often disagreed with Jefferson and Madison, that were both in the cabinet with him, about the Constitution having some implied powers. Hamilton wanted a new national bank, but Jefferson and Madison were both against. This led for Hamilton to create the Federalist Party, creating the first party system, and therefore leaving the cabinet. Before the duel ever happened with Burr, they were both lawyers, and were often on opposing sides. His conflict with Burr arose after Hamilton blocked his ambitions of becoming president and governor of New York. After this had happened, Burr was angered and challenged Hamilton to a duel, in which it led to Hamilton's death, after the shot went through his abdomen. Hamilton died at the hospital where he was being taken care of.
Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13th, 1743, into an elite family. His father was Peter Jefferson, a cartographer who drew the first accurate map of Virginia, and a successful farmer. His mother, Jane Randolph, was part of Randolph clan which had English and Scottish descent. Jefferson was part of a big family, being the third of 10 children. As a child, he enjoyed playing the violin and reading books. Once he was of age, he attended the College of William and Mary to study law. However, instead of studying, he played card games, did bets on horse races, and courted women. It was when Jefferson met George Wythe when he actually started studying law. Being a tough instructor, Wythe had Jefferson study law for 5 years, which is 2 times longer than normal. This would later give him an edge over other politicians. Later, in 1770, the construction of Monticello would begin. This building would become Jefferson's home and plantation, containing more or less 130 slaves. In 1772, Arthur Jefferson and Thomas Jefferson married and had 6 children, but it wasn't enough for Thomas. 2.5 decades later, he had been caught cheating on his wife with her half-sister and a slave, Sally Hemings. With DNA evidence, he can no longer deny the truth. In 1776, Jefferson attended the Second Continental Congress and was picked to draft the Declaration of Independence. This document would become one of Jefferson's most notable accomplishments. The next year, he created the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, which created freedom of religion and church. In 1779, Jefferson became the second Virginian governor and served for a little over 2 terms. After leaving his position, he settled down and wrote a book called Notes on the State of Virginia. And as the title suggests, the book had information all about Virginia. By 1783, Jefferson had returned to his field and was chosen to replace Benjamin Franklin as the ambassador to France. He stayed at France for almost 5 years before returning and selected by George Washington to become his Secretary of State. After once again resigning his position, the Republican Party chose him to represent them and run for president. With alternate events, he beat Aaron Burr to become the third U.S. president. As the president, Jefferson accomplished many things, one of which was lowering national debt from $80 million to $57 million. More importantly, however, was the Louisiana Purchase, which was only bought for only $15 million and increased the size of U.S. by more than 2 times. In addition, the Tripoli pirates were wiped off the map after Jefferson declared war on them. Unfortunately, he did not end his second term well. The Embargo Act of 1807 ended all trade with foreign countries, and as a result, caused the economy to crash and was the catalyst to the start of the War of 1812.
Now let's move on to the super famous Benjamin Franklin. Ben Franklin was born January 17th, 1706 in Boston, Massachusetts, then a British colony. He actually had 16 siblings, so his parents were probably pretty busy back then. Franklin went to school until he was 10 and then dropped out to become a candle maker, but his lifelong dream was to become a sailor. Now we obviously know that he didn't become a sailor, but it's probably for the better of our country that he didn't. Before becoming involved in politics, he was an inventor, postmaster, author, etc. He invented many things, such as the printing press, wrote the Poor Richard's Almanac, and conducted many electrical experiments. The urban legend that he flew a kite during a thunderstorm is actually true. During his political life, he was involved in many events that led up to America's split from Great Britain, including the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the publication of the Join or Die political cartoon, the adoption of the U.S. Constitution, and many other major events. His face was eventually put on the $100 bill. Benjamin Franklin even liked farting so much that he wrote an entire book about the subject. Sadly, near the end of his life, he became increasingly unpopular in the newly formed United States. Congress refused to accept any of his requests, including the ones for land in the West. Even after his death, the Senate refused to go along with the House to declare a month of mourning for Franklin. Although Benjamin Franklin died unpopular and sad, he lived his life as a national hero. Alright, now let's talk about some fun facts. Despite Ben Franklin being viewed as one of the most important patriots, his son was actually an avid British loyalist. Quite ironic, huh? Franklin was also a great swimmer. He was even put on the International Swimming Hall of Fame. Now that's unexpected. He was also extremely popular with the people in France, becoming a fashion icon. French ladies wore caps with oversized wigs in a style known as this French word in the top right corner that I unfortunately cannot pronounce. Man, imagine if he did become a sailor.
Okay, let's talk about John Adams. John Adams' early life. He was born in Braintree, Massachusetts on October 30th, 1735, to the descendants of Mayflower Pilgrims. John Adams was the oldest of John and Susanna Boylston Adams. He was one of three sons. His father was a farmer and shoemaker. Also served as a Congregationalist deacon and a politician in government. His achievements that he would be proud of was graduating from Harvard University in 1755, began his law career in 1758, and eventually becoming one of Boston's most prominent attorneys. He then married Abigail Smith in 1764, and she was a daughter of a minister from Weymouth, Massachusetts. They also had six children, four of whom survived until adulthood. His political life. John Adams became the first vice president of America, and then he ran for presidency over with Thomas Jefferson, and he won. Then Thomas Jefferson became the second vice president. Eventually, Thomas Jefferson defeated John Adams to another elections for to become the third president of of, of America. During that time, they they um they became on bad terms with each other, fighting to become president. Put them on bad terms. They spread rumors about each other, which making them look bad, having anger and hate between them. Eventually, they made up, but then the time for them was short, and they died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, which is ironically on the same day we celebrate our independence, July 4th. In the end, in the end, the founding fathers are important primarily because they unite the 13 colonies and provide a strong foundation for the United States of America by creating a constitution that would support a democracy rather than a monarchy. Moreover, they shaped the nation by addressing issues such as economies and ensuring the prosperity of the United States of America. Although the founding fathers were from different backgrounds, ranging from lawyers, military leaders, and other professions,
They met together and had one purpose of creating a better future for America. And here's our bibliography. Don't worry, there's multiple. And that's it. Thank you for listening to this presentation